What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and look at that card. Look at that in all of its glory. It is absolutely beautiful. I know I dream of having this Charizard first edition holo someday, probably not in a PSA 10 gem mint, but I think that, you know, it's a holy grail card, and in order to be a true hardcore collector like I plan to be someday, obviously some version of this has to be in my collection, and it's just a beautiful card. It's really cool. It's a great piece of history. So the reason I'm doing this video is because one of these sold on eBay the other day and nobody's talking about it. Nobody. Like, that's a big deal for our hobby. When one of these holy grails, especially in only in PSA 10, I don't care if 9s or 8 sells, but when a PSA 10 of one of these sells, this is something we have to look at and we have to talk about. And, you know, I've been working hard on this video that's coming out tomorrow. We're going to talk about buying some raw cards, submitting them to PSA, getting them graded, flipping them for a profit. But I had to take a pause and put this together and talk about this because this is a big moment in our hobby. Anytime something like this happens, it's great for us to do a deep dive into it because it gives us an idea like, hey, what are the whales paying? How much excitement is there for rare cards like this? You know, and I also feel like there's an opportunity here because, you know, there seems to be this beef between vintage and modern, and, you know, I saw somebody the other day and they were talking about, well, if you had bought this at the peak of the pandemic, then, you know, you would have lost X amount of dollars. That's not how I think we should look at things, okay? I think that's like saying, hey, if you would have purchased your house at the peak of the housing crisis, you know, you'd be upside down in it. Well, yeah, of course you would, you know, or if you bought Enron before it went bankrupt, or if you know, bought toys.com or books.com right before the dot-com bubble. There's always going to be these singular events in any market, whether it's commodities, housing, alternative investments, stock market. There are always going to be these singular events, but you can't use those singular events to define the overall trajectory of anything, right? When people talk about the stock market, they say it's not a smooth upward to the right path. You have ups and downs and wiggles all the way around the road. Now, the pandemic certainly was a heck of a wiggle. We're going to look at that here in a minute, but I don't think that's indicative of the overall Pokemon collecting hobby. So, without further ado, I want to talk about this, and let's get into it and see what actually happened here. So this is it. This is the sale that happened the other day on eBay. So PSA 10 Charizard Holo first edition sold for $50,000. Now, before anybody hits the panic button and says, well, this was selling for, you know, $250,000 not long ago, that's okay, and we're going to talk about why here in a minute. I highlighted the seller's name, not for any other reason, just to call out that this person only had 13 reviews. And, you know, if you're going to be dropping huge cards where you want to get $50,000 to $100,000 on eBay, I think there are some people who might have been a little reluctant to bid because of the lack of history this person has with eBay. I do like that there was 69 bids, so it shows that there was a ton of activity. I was watching this for like the last hour. I kept refreshing my eBay app because I just kept waiting for it to pop and pop, and it went from 30 to 50. And then honestly, I expected it to pop a little bit more, but it held steady at $50,100. But I think that's a great price, and I'm going to go through it. I've got some graphs here at the end. I'm going to explain to you why I think it's a great price. But I will say this too, like if you're going to sell a grail item like this, it is worth it to look at, you know, golden auctions, even though I'm not a huge fan of golden auctions, heritage auctions, Sotheby's. Like, there's all of these big auction houses, and what they will do is they will go out and they will advertise this for you. Now, they get a 20% buyer's premium, so the buyer pays 20% of whatever the final sale price is to the auction house. But they will go out and they will advertise all of this. I'm shocked that nobody, at least if anybody knew this was going on, not a lot of people were talking about it. I can't find a YouTube video about it, which is why we're doing this today. So those are my recommendations. You know, if you've got a $50,000, $100,000 card, first off, be my friend. Second off, and you want to sell it, don't do it on eBay. Find an auction house and see what they'll do for you. So I thought it was important to look at some of these most recent sale prices. Now, this is straight from the PSA website, okay? And these are not including any private sales, right? Like I think Logan Paul bought one for $150,000 cash. These are all public sales, which is fine. There's enough data points here that it's statistically relevant. You'll see that Golden Auctions was the last three, January of 2022, so a year ago, one sold at Golden for $252,000. Then you'll see in September of 2021, $270,000. It peaked right there in March of 2021 at almost $400,000 at Golden. And then you can see the run up to it. Started in November of 2020. November 2020, you know, we kissed 300,000, then we got to 350, then we got to 400, then it went to 270, then it went to 252. So these are pandemic numbers. Now, I want to be clear. They're good. They're reference points. Like, we should absolutely be cognizant of the fact that this card sold for this much during the pandemic time. But I don't think it's indicative of the overall value of the card. I don't think it's indicative of the overall trajectory of the card. It's again, one of those singular moments in times. I pray to God none of us go through a pandemic again. But it's fun to watch. It was cool to see it happen. I know I was on the sidelines eating my popcorn, watching all these football cards and Pokemon cards sell for millions of dollars, but I wasn't partaking in it. We've already talked about that. So if nothing else, this is a reminder to all of us average Joes and Janes that when things start to get a little too frothy, it's not a bad idea to sit on the sidelines and bank some money here. This is what I think is even better to look at. So these are pre-pandemic pricing. So I know not everybody has $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to invest in cardboard. Matter of fact, I would say the bulk of the majority of us don't. But this is closer to what average Jones and Janes were paying. So if you look at November of 2017, it started off at $20,000. You'll see all the way in December of 2019, which is really when the pandemic started heating up. It wasn't when the Pokemon hobby started heating up, but the pandemic was getting rolling then. And you see it went all the way up to $36,000. We have a $40,000. But really, 19 to 36,000 over 2 years is a great growth, right? I mean, that's a huge amount of growth over a couple years. So it shows slow and steady growth here during more normal times is what I'm going to say. And now I have a couple graphs here which illustrates this, and I hope that this hammers home why I feel so confident that this card being sold for $50,000 is actually a really good thing for the hobby, and it actually is a great indicator of the overall strength of the market as a whole. So this is the chart where we include all of the sales, including the pandemic sales. I mean, this chart is, well, it's statistically irrelevant because the highs are so high compared to the lows. I mean, you start at 17,000 and you go all the way up to 400,000. Even looking at this chart, it just looks silly, right? It looks like it was flat, then it peaked, then it came down. But that's not a good indication of the overall growth of the card. So what I did in this next graph was I stripped out the pandemic times. I said, okay, let's take this period of time where we can all admit things were a little batty. Things were a little bit crazy, so let's take that period of time, let's cut that out, and let's see what the growth of the card is like now that we can say, hey, we're on the other side of things, and we've normalized a bit. So when you pull out those 5 big sales in the middle, this is what you get. This is a strong growth, okay? Again, I'm so worried that some people out there are going to see this card selling for $50,000 and they're going to highlight the fact that one sold for $400,000 and now this sold for $50,000. They're going to highlight the fact that whoever that was that spent $400,000 is now severely upside down in this card. I'm going to be honest with you. People who are spending $250,000, $500,000 on pieces of cardboard, a paper loss of $500,000 to them is nothing. This isn't somebody who mortgaged their home. This isn't somebody who used all of their life savings to buy. These are people who have hundreds of millions of dollars in most cases, and if they invest $500,000 in a sports card, it's nothing to them, okay? If they invest $500,000 in a Pokemon card, it's nothing to them, okay? So we're taking all of those non-hobbyists, non-enthusiasts out of the equation. Those are just whales who are collecting for the sake of collecting. And when we look at when people like you and me, average Joes and Janes, I might continue to use that throughout this channel. Tell me if you like it or hate it. This is a really strong graph. We look at all the way November 27 to February of 23. It's upward and to the right. As always, there's little undulations up and down, and of course it goes flat over the pandemic period because we don't have any data in there. But when you look at it, this lets me know, hey, the hobby's growing, it's growing safely. I mean, just think about all the people, all the new people we have from the pandemic. Sure, a bunch of people flooded in, a lot of people were flippers, they wanted to make a quick buck, and then they exited, but a good amount of them have stayed, and they're in it to win it, they're in it for the long haul. They love the hobby again, which is just super exciting. It's a ton of fun, and it's gonna drive great prices for us in the long run. So these are my takeaways. I want to stress this. There's no modern versus vintage, right? Like this isn't a Crips and Bloods. This isn't a, and it's not any kind of gang war here. We need modern to do well. We need vintage to do well because we are one hobby. We want the hobby as a whole to grow and expand. The modern of today is going to be the vintage of tomorrow. And again, I've said this in some of my earlier videos, 1999 to me isn't vintage. It's not vintage to me, right? Like a 1952 Mickey Mantle sold 6 months ago for $12.6 million. $12.6 million. It was the most expensive piece of memorabilia, sports memorabilia ever. It could be a bat, it could be a ball, it could be an autograph, it could be a photo, it could be a card. It was the most expensive piece of sports memorabilia ever sold. 1952, that's vintage, okay? That was also a one of one. We're gonna talk about the populations down there and why, a lot of big time collectors and big time, deep pockets like one of one things, but Coming back to that Charizard, so the final 3 pre-pandemic sales averaged $34,000, and we just dropped one for $50,000, not more than 2 years later. That's great. So, you know, it's a $16,000 increase, almost a 50% gain on your investment, 21% annual compound growth rate. Like, all of that is good, ladies and gentlemen. All of that is great. All of that shows that the hobby is growing. There's enthusiasts here. There's people with deep pockets who are in this market. Like, all of that is really, really good indications of the hobby. And again, I was talking about a population report. Listen, a Pop 123 isn't rare. The fact that this sold for $50,000 and there's 122 more of these out there in the world just shows you how strong this card is desired, like how much people want this. That is a huge population for a card to sell that high. It just is. You know, I've been in the sports card space for a long time. I know about population reports and how it ties directly into prices. You know, when you get into the 10s, the 20s, that's where you start seeing crazy prices. But a Pop 123 with this selling for $50,000, I think that is just awesome. Now, I will say that there's a much bigger collector base in Pokemon than in anything else, so you know, that lends itself to some higher prices, but we should all feel really, really, really good about this. So anyways, nobody was talking about this. I thought this was a really awesome data point. I thought this was very exciting and encouraging for the hobby as a whole. I wanted to get this information out in front of you in case it was flying under your radar. And yeah, check in tomorrow. I've got that PSA graded video coming out where we're going to look at some raw cards. We're going to sub them to PSA. See if we can't make a couple nickels off of that. But I'm really excited. So you guys have an epic Saturday, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Peace.